Hello and good evening. Welcome to the Tunnel Podcast on a night where we launch a new series. I sit down with our very first guest is a man whose voice will have filled living rooms up and down the country, whether he's been enjoying the National League in the afternoon or a European night. It's TNT Sports' Adam Summerton. Adam, how you doing?
I'm really good. Thanks for having me on. Nice to speak to you.
Oh, listen, delighted to have you on. It's a big deal for us, certainly. Look, I'm not going to go full Michael Aspo and whip out the big red book or anything like that, or turn you into an Ian Wright meme and bring out a teacher that's passed away or anything like that. But certainly do want to start, if we can, by going back to your sort of football upbringing in sort of the mid-80s. If you can just tell us a bit about that and who you maybe followed and had an interest in back then when you were a little lad.
Yeah, I mean, I played quite a lot of football as a kid. Played from a few local teams, and then ended up as it was YTS, what we called it then back in the day at Preston North End. I was there for, I don't know, 6 months to a year, something like that, and then got released when I was 15. So I played to a decent level as a kid. And yeah, watched a lot of football as well. It was always that question, which you prefer more watching or playing, I guess. I think I was a bit in between, really, as a kid. Probably more enjoyed playing, really. But yeah, then fast forward and obviously did school and then went to university and did broadcast journalism there. And then after I'd left university, just started my way up the ladder, really, through initially something called RSLs, which is where a radio license is tested out in a particular area for a month. And I did one in Torbay, I did one in Barrow in Furness. And then after that, I eventually got my first job in radio in Mansfield, a small commercial radio station. It's still going now. And just gradually, that was in 2003 that I got my first permanent job in radio. And then, I've just kind of looked to really climb the ladder in first radio and then TV after that, really. So, yeah, it's a journey of, I suppose, it's over 20 years, isn't it, from when I took my first job.
Yeah, it's a great journey from what I've done my homework over the last few days, and certainly some interesting stuff to speak about. We'll come back to Mansfield in a moment. There was your father took you to Anfield, I believe, when you were at sort of a little lad, maybe 5 or 6, and the team on the field at that day, you ended up working alongside a couple of them in later life.
Yeah, yes, I did. Yeah, I only discovered that recently, actually, through doing another podcast. But yeah, I was born and brought up in Southport, so Liverpool and obviously Everton were nearby. My dad was from Liverpool, and my first game was there, and I'm trying to remember now. I think it was 1985. And on the team sheet that day were Jim Beglin for Liverpool, Jim Beglin and Phil Neal. Peter Shilton was in goal for Southampton, but I actually went on to co-comment. Well, they were co-commentators with me, both Phil Neal and Jim Beglin. In fact, Jim I've worked with a number of times. I love his company. But it is pretty surreal that as a 5-year-old, I think I was then. Obviously, nobody could ever really have predicted, this 5-year-old here will end up working on TV with a couple of the players involved that day. So yeah, that is pretty surreal, I've got to say.
Jim Beglin, iconic for me. I'm a Rangers fan when I'm not sitting in this chair, and he was synonymous for that. UEFA Cup run to Manchester all them many years ago. Alongside, I think it was Peter Drury at the time that was doing the ITV stuff. So, I know Jim's dulcet tones well. Certainly enjoyed his stuff. Stevie McManaman, he's another one who seems to you've sat alongside, in European nights as well. Yeah, is it awestruck for you, or do you just take it all in your stride?
No, I think after a period of time, obviously, when you've worked with so many former footballers who you have an admiration for, certainly. I mean, I was only saying to someone the other day, I'd put Steve as one of, if not the best British export to a foreign league. I know there's one or two contenders, but he had a wonderful career, didn't he? So no, I don't think you really get. I wouldn't say awestruck, but I think there's a respect there, absolutely. In fact, I actually said to Steve's face that I think he's one of the best English players that we've ever produced. It was great. He's so down to earth, though, Steve. It's one of the reasons that I really love working with him, because when you think you're working with somebody who's won the European Cup with Real Madrid and and played for Liverpool and Manchester City over here as well, but he's just a really down to earth guy. But I can tell you, going out for some food with him in Madrid is a great experience. I've got to say, you get treated well.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the restaurants.
He scored that goal in the final against, was it Valencia?
He did score in the final.
Kick.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Some great memories there as well. Okay, let's go back to the Mansfield stuff, because I think you're kind of thrown in at the deep end there, you would say, but in a good way. I think you described it as getting bitten by the bug that day. They were looking for maybe someone to cover the football,
Yeah.
and followed Adam Summerton.
Yeah, well, as I say, I started there in 2003, and it was a fantastic. It was almost like I'd come out of uni, and then it was like almost like a finishing course, but on the job, because it was a small commercial radio station, a great little radio station that really punches above its weight. It's where I still listen to it every day now, even though obviously I've not worked there for a long time, and there's still a lot of people there who helped me when I was starting out, who were still there, including the MD Tony Delahunty and the news editor Ian Watkins. And I just I was employed as a newsreader and a reporter. But I kind of did everything there as I say, from news reading to being a journalist, to interviewing people, to presenting shows. And they kind of said, we think you'd be pretty good at commentary and we'd like to give you a go. I'd never really thought about doing commentary, to be honest. I always quite liked the idea of doing reports from grounds like you might hear on TalkSport or 5 Live, where they'll cross over to a reporter at a ground for 30 seconds a minute. So I always thought I'd quite like to have a go at that. But commentary, I never really had seen myself doing. But when I did that game, and Mansfield won 2-1 away at Cambridge United at the Abbey Stadium, and Mansfield finished the game with 9 men. Keith Curl was the manager then. He was almost nose to nose with a policeman on the pitch at the end. It was just utter chaos. And I just remember the adrenaline was just absolutely surging through me. I mean, if I listened back to it, it'd be very ropey, I've no doubt. But the adrenaline buzz that I got from that, I just thought, oh, I've got to do this again. I absolutely loved this. And of course, I suppose from that moment, I maybe wanted to really pursue a career as a commentator, but it was a very long road from that moment to when I could eventually, what you might say, specialize just in football commentary. That was a lot of sort of 6 and 7 day weeks where I would do news reading and work as a journalist in radio newsrooms around the East Midlands during the week, and then I would do commentary at the weekends and sort of try and build up a name and a reputation and experience over a very long period of time. So it was probably around 20. I'm not quite sure, but maybe sort of 2016, around then, perhaps, when I would maybe go full time as a commentator. So as you can see, it's a good number of years, but yeah, worth all the effort. I've absolutely loved my job.
When you're doing the initial game and you've sat back and thought, this is the job for me, do you start then setting yourself targets or ambitions? Like, what was the mindset? Did you always want to be on TV, or did you just want to do bigger games on the radio?
Well, I suppose when I was first starting out in radio, maybe TV wasn't really something I was thinking about at that point. But I love doing radio. I still do. I don't get to do it very often, but when I do, I absolutely love it. I suppose it's a bit of a first love, really. And I just love how I love the descriptive side of it as well, which might sound quite weird to you as a TV commentator, because less is more very often with TV commentary. But I like switching between the two skills. I like the challenge of that. But TV just felt almost like a natural progression, really, in terms of going from radio to TV. Not everyone does that. Some people will stay in radio their whole careers, but it just felt for me like the challenge of doing TV was something that really interested me as time went on. And then I started to build, try and build a knowledge and experience and a reputation doing TV, and started out doing things like club TV channels and world feed games. And then I'd sort of garnered a fair degree of experience. But at the point at which BT Sport launched, the timing of that was perfect for me, really. I was in my early 30s. I really wanted to start working in national TV. I felt like I'd got the body of experience behind me to do that, and was a little bit frustrated that things hadn't happened for me in that respect prior. And then when BT came along and I sent them a demo, and very quickly they came back and said, yeah, we like that. And they didn't just say, we might give you a game. They said, here's 3 games, here's 3 dates to put in your diary. And to this day, it's still the best email I've ever had. It felt like that was, it felt at the time like it was my sort of big break, if you like. And I suppose that's exactly what it turned out to be. And I thought, if they're going to give me a chance, I'm going to absolutely bite their hand off. They are not going to regret giving me a chance. And that was what I did. I took it, ran with it, and wanted to prove them right, I suppose. And hopefully I've done that.
Well,
But I love it. Yeah.
I think it speaks for itself in terms of when you look at your rise in terms of the profile of games that you do now. Even just last season, so I heard you a lot on conference, UEFA Conference League and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that certainly justifies that. Do you remember the 3 games in particular that you were given?
I don't remember the actual fixtures, but they were. I know one was definitely an Italian game. There was a German game that I did with Jim Beglin. That he was the first. In fact, I think that was the. Who was that? I can't remember. I can't remember off the top. It was a newly promoted team. Anyway, I remember that. But yeah,
are they done live or in bunkers?
They were done from London. Yeah, off
Right, okay,
what we would call off tube. Yeah.
All right.
So yeah.
Well, let's go into that sort of National League stuff, because I do think that was you become sort of synonymous as the voice of the National League, particularly in some of the seasons that I'll pinpoint in a second. But I'd heard in a previous podcast it was always your ambition to commentate from Wembley Stadium, and you got that wish in 2016 for the National League playoff final.
Yeah, I've got quite a few stadiums I've always wanted to commentate from, and I've been lucky enough to tick quite a few off now. And San Siro, which I did in the last couple of years, was another. But Wembley was just awe-inspiring, really. I think it was particularly special because obviously as an Englishman, proud of being English and proud of the national stadium as well. And it was just something I'd always wanted to do. And I remember on the day arriving about 5 or 6 hours before the game, which was ridiculously early. But I remember being quite glad I'd done that, because I spent the first few hours just kind of looking around with my mouth wide open, really. And I was glad that I kind of took that time to just acclimatise to being there. It's always quite a good idea as a commentator to, particularly if you've got quite a high vantage point as it is at Wembley, always a good idea to, the way I describe it is get your eye in and arrive early, because people might not realise, but the different heights you're at can affect your reading of the game. I remember when I did that first game at Wembley, for the first sort of 5 or 10 minutes of that game, I found it a little bit difficult because it was the highest vantage point I'd ever been at. And just judging the quality and the trajectory of a cross was something that just took a 5 or 10 minutes to get your eye in, so that you were calling it. Obviously, you've got your monitor there as well, so you can be flicking between looking at the pitch and looking at your monitor. But yeah, I always like to get early to a ground and get my eye in and just get my sort of all my vantage points in my head. But yeah, I loved it at Wembley. I'm so lucky that I get to travel around Europe. I never, ever take that for granted. You never know when it will end as well. So you've always got to soak it up and make the most of it. And I've just ticked off so many stadiums, particularly this season, actually, that I'd always wanted to go to. And just the guys that I work with, they very often just laugh at me because I'll be like, we'll get there the day before, and I'll be like, anyone fancy coming down the stadium to have a look round? And they're all like, we'll be seeing it tomorrow, Adam. Let's just go out for a meal or something. I'm not. So I get a lot of, like, obviously gentle stick and ribbing for that, but yeah, no, I'm just a football geek, really. So I love going to all the different stadiums.
I think I'd be the same, to be honest. Absolutely bucket list for stadiums. In terms of Vanarama, the National League, was that something did you have knowledge of that before you started working in there? Because it's not got a lot of exposure, not until obviously BT started covering it really in this country, and I certainly hadn't started watching any until probably about 2 or 3 seasons ago with the rise of Wrexham. So was that something you'd study a lot of, or you'd seen a lot of, or?
No, not really. It was something that, in terms of my progression at what was BT Sport then, was it was a natural next step for me, really, as it turned out, because it might sound strange this to people, because previously at BT, I'd just been commentating on the European league. So at the time, it was the Bundesliga, Serie A and Liga 1. So obviously that's top level football, but it wasn't on site. It was all off tube, and it wasn't our productions. It was world feeds that we would commentate over. So in order for me to climb the ladder at BT Sport, I needed to be involved in on-site productions, which that obviously was. We were actually physically at the ground. It was all our production. It was our director. It was somebody who was talking in my ears, rather than we were just taking the pictures as they came. So for me to develop and grow as a commentator and move up the ladder at BT, which was obviously very keen to do, I needed to do more stuff on site. And obviously they weren't going to, at that point, in my development, they were never going to put me straight on the Premier League. So it was a way of moving up the ladder there. So I was absolutely delighted when I got the chance on it. And I think what you have to do when you do any league, whatever that may be, it's very important to then say, look, I've been given this chance. They've told me that I'm going to be doing it regularly. Let's learn it. Let's embrace it. Let's really research this heavily, make sure that I'm really clued up on all the different teams. And that's what I did, really. And I just threw myself into it. I almost felt like, in a way, that nobody ever said this to me. I just kind of felt myself that I wanted to almost take responsibility to publicize and grow the league. And as the more I did it, the more I grew to love it and that level of football. And the more I suppose I grew to respect it as well as a standard of football, and saw the hard work that goes into it for not great money at that level of the game, but so much effort and commitment. People who do it as volunteers, people who are doing it part-time, and also the little gems that you discover at that level of football as well. I mean, so many that we've seen over the years. And you know what? If I think back, whilst I've covered all levels of the game, right up to the very top, like the Champions League and the Premier League, non-league footballers, as a commentator, has given me some of the most memorable, exciting moments of my broadcasting career so far. It's just, yeah, I mean, just thinking about it just makes me smile, really, when I think some of the great games we've watched over the years. So, yeah, it's a great level of the game to cover.
Okay, well, listen, that's a pertinent point you make there about, key moments and celebrating, these fantastic games. I'll go back to, this David and Goliath battle between Wrexham and Notts County 22-23 season. I think that seemed to grip the whole nation, to be honest. I remember being at a communion in Glasgow with some family, and we're all around the phone watching the Wrexham County game at the racecourse, just because we'd all bought into it so much. But that season, record points, you look at the two top goal scorers, Mullen and Longstaff, nearly 40 goals apiece. It was just quite an incredible season for everyone involved at that level.
Yeah, it's probably personally my favourite season covering football, really. It was just, the title race was one for the ages. It had everything. Obviously, you had the story of Hollywood ownership at Wrexham as well. Notts County in themselves were a fantastic story. The playoffs that year were utterly unbelievable as well. So even after we'd had that title race, it all just carried on. I mean, the drama just...
breath, could you?
No, the drama just continued, and the great stories and narratives. And then I was lucky enough as well to do some great games in Europe, and ended up covering West Ham's Conference League final victory as well in Prague, which I'll never forget as well. So I've got so many. I've got in my office upstairs in my house. I've got a whole wall just covered with sort of mementos of that season, because I loved it so much. It was just absolutely brilliant in so many different ways to be part of. And yeah, even just like being on the gantry at Wembley at the end of the promotion final between Notts and Chesterfield, and commentating on the final, and what an unbelievable game that was. And then seeing my phone light up at the end of it, and it was a direct message off Ryan Reynolds saying how much he'd enjoyed the game. And that just kind of summed up it just summed up the craziness of that season. They were great as well, the Wrexham owners. I've got a lot of time for them, and just the enthusiasm that came through from Ryan Reynolds in that message about just how much he enjoyed it, just as a football, or a new football fan, if you like. So just great memories of that season. Yeah.
Just on Wrexham then there, because I did want to draw a comparison between them and Salford City, who I think, in terms of ownership, they've got guys backing them with a bit of clout, a bit of money. But do you think there's just a bit more passion from these American guys, where they've come into something that they genuinely want to grow, whereas maybe Neville and the like, they've been satisfied through other means in football, if that makes sense?
I think they're very different stories, aren't they? They're very different setups in terms of Wrexham and Salford. I know people will draw parallels because they both did what they did in the National League with an ambition to get into the Football League as quickly as possible. But you look at the starting points, and obviously Wrexham is a much bigger club in terms of fan base, and that's going to be critical for them growing the club. I think we've seen that, the commitment has always been there from the class of, it's class of 92, isn't it? I was trying to remember the year then. Class of 92. I think there's always been the commitment there, but it's going to be a harder job for them just because of the size of the fan base, really, to grow it. Because obviously Wrexham, in terms of, as well as the financial restrictions that there are in terms of how much of your what you're making that you can spend. Wrexham are always going to make more money because they've got a bigger stadium, they've got a bigger fan base, they can sell more merchandise, they've got the Hollywood owners who are bringing in money in different aspects as well. So it's hard really to compare the two football clubs. I mean, I've said before, I've said on record, I believe Wrexham, I mean, who knows how long it will take, but I do believe they will, if these current owners stay, and there's no reason to believe they won't. I'd be surprised if they didn't make the Premier League one day. I really do think that's a realistic ambition for Wrexham with those owners. I think they'll find it tougher the more they go up the pyramid. The jump from the League One to the Championship will be harder, I think, than League Two to League One, and then obviously the Championship to the Premier League will be a leap again. But I just think that they're so they're clued up, and that what they've done really well at Wrexham is that they never thought they knew it all. They came in and said, "Look, we're new to football. We know business, and we've done well in business. We've got the enthusiasm. We know that we'll bring in a lot of interest," but they quickly surrounded themselves with a team of people who they knew more about them than football, both on and off the pitch, and they deferred to them. And that's been very successful for them. And I've got a lot of admiration for what they've done. At Wrexham, I understand that a lot of people feel, aggrieved about the money that's gone in there. And I understand that it's not everybody's cup of tea, but having seen it up close, I have got a lot of time for what they've done at Wrexham. And I always like to keep an eye out for all the teams that get promoted from the National League, whether that be Wrexham or, a team like Sutton United, who I know have come back down now, but they were a great story in a different way. Harrogate, we've seen so many good stories in that league over the years, and I always enjoy tracking their progress.
Just on tracking progress, because I kind of thought when County came up with through the players that they had a really good start to League Two last season, but then obviously lost the manager to Swansea and kind of fell away there as well. So in the summer links to Macaulay Longstaff to Swansea as well. He's got a number of suitors, I believe. Do you think that was the key there, that they just lost a manager and couldn't keep that momentum going?
Yeah, I think there were probably problems there before the manager left, actually, in terms of the balance of the side, the defensive vulnerabilities, probably issues that were maybe some of us could see when they were in the National League, but were really magnified at a slightly higher level, perhaps. They scored a frightening number of goals for a newly promoted side, but it was just those issues of balance and defensive ability, really. And it's interesting that this summer they've really already, even this early on in the summer, they've really sought to address the defensive side of things, and have signed several promising defenders for that level of the game. And I think they'll do well this season, actually. But I think there were problems there, as I say, before the manager left. That was quite obvious. The new manager wasn't able on the hoof in mid-season to be able to correct those problems. But look, who knows, with the summer behind him and a pre-season behind him and new players in the building, I've got quite high hopes for Notts County this season, particularly if they keep Langstaff and Jody Jones as well, who are two of the best forward players at that level too. And if they get Palmer back fit too, who for me was probably the most, some people might laugh at this when you look at the numbers racked up by Jones and Langstaff, but I think losing Palmer was a key reason why it went south for Notts last season, actually, because he's probably their most important player, in the same way to how maybe someone like Rodri you could say is Man City's most important player, because he balanced it all out. And when they lost him to injury, I felt that was a real blow to the whole balance of the team and how it functioned. So if they can get him back fit as well, that'll make a big difference.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we'll draw a line under the Vanarama stuff and move on swiftly, because I've noticed throughout the Euros you have been tweeting a bit about the Italian side, and look, they've fallen short. There's been a lot come out since then. I'm reading a piece earlier on this morning, just sort of saying that the dressing room was never united. Fagoli, they've labelled him a snitch. I don't know in what terms there, certainly. Unhappy with training methods. It just didn't seem to glue at all, did it?
No, and it was probably the tournament probably came too early into Spalletti's time in charge. I think I'm right in saying it's probably around 10 months that he's been in charge, and Spalletti's style of play, or the one that he would wish, I'm sure, ultimately to impart, perhaps similar to what we saw with that wonderful team that he produced at Napoli that did so well in winning the Serie A title. I'm sure that he'd like to ultimately produce a team that would play in a similar vein, but I just think that, you could ask, does he have the players within that Italy squad as it stands right now to even play that type of football? I think that's a valid question. but also has he had long enough to impart that? And I think the answer is probably no. But it felt like a team that was struggling in terms of that transition. It felt like a team that was maybe struggling in terms of its identity. I suppose you could look at it in the fact that 6 changes were made, I think, for the last game, and that probably suggests that, doesn't it? That it's a coach sort of really not quite sure of how to get the right blend, and you're always going to struggle really unless you've got some real star quality that can get you out of a tricky situation. Like I suppose you could say England did with Bellingham at the weekend. I mean, they were terrible, really, England at the weekend, but they had that one bit of genius, that overhead kick that's made the difference in the end. And that is another thing that Italy are lacking right now. It's undeniable that whilst there are very good players there, and somebody like Bastoni, for instance, I would rate as one of the best centre-backs in the world right now. I rate him that highly. And obviously there's a lot of the Inter players there who've just won the Scudetto in such fantastic form. I still think they are lacking that X factor, that star quality. Maybe somebody like Chiesa could provide that, but he's struggled for consistency and continuity and fitness, which doesn't help him. There's a lack of centre forwards right now for the Italian national side. So there's a lot of issues there, and it's all culminated in what was a dreadfully underwhelming performance against the Swiss. By the way, though, the Swiss did very well. We shouldn't we shouldn't underestimate how well they did.
They seem to be one of the only teams in the tournament that have sort of an identity and know what they're actually doing. And with Shah, Akanji, and Granit Xhaka, they've got a really good, solid base as well. Yeah,
I don't think you can underestimate that, particularly in a tournament, and how important it is to just, even if you haven't necessarily got the best star quality, you can still be a really well-functioning team. And another side I would say about that, I mean, they're playing tonight, aren't they, is Austria. I think they just suit Rangnick, the coach. He suits them and they suit him. I really rate. I covered, I think it was their penultimate warm-up game, and I thought before the tournament, in fact, I said on Twitter, actually, I thought that they might surprise some people, and I wouldn't be surprised at all. I mean, I'll probably have egg in my face and they'll go out tonight, but I wouldn't be surprised if they went really deep into this tournament. I really, really like Austria. And as well, it's worth saying about Austria, they're doing this without their captain, Alaba, their first-choice goalkeeper, Alex Schlager, and also without a player who might well have started in midfield, Schlager as well, the Leipzig player. So without 3 big players for them, they're doing really well. But it's because the point I'm making here is that they are such a well-honed team unit. And, the contrast being that somebody like England and France have got all the names in the world, but just don't look like teams right now, particularly England.
Just on England then, do you think that, because obviously we mentioned the Swiss, that'll be the next opponents of the weekend. Should Austria go through, they could possibly face England in a semi-final. It's different sort of levels of challenge for England now. They're going up a notch. They're going up a notch every time, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And look, we all know with England that particularly going forward, there's all the ability in the world there. I mean, they're up there with Portugal and France in terms of having the most exciting forward lines, aren't they, at the tournament? But there is a lack of cohesion. There is undeniable lack of balance, particularly on the left. There's a congested area where you've got Kane, Foden and Bellingham all really occupying similar spaces, with Kane dropping and Foden wanting to come in from the left all the time. He's much more comfortable playing centrally. You've got a right-footed left back. So I mean, to be fair though, I think we've all been saying the same thing for all 4 games, really, haven't we, in terms of the analysis that's followed there. So it's whether Gareth Southgate looks to change it or not. I mean, I can't see really after such a big body of evidence, 4 games, why he wouldn't change it. But I know there are people and a lot of people who are saying they don't think he will. So we'll see. I mean, he might just be hoping that eventually it's all just going to click. But
that's what it seems to feel like, doesn't it? I mean, I think you look at the last game, Ivan Toney comes on with a minute to go, and I thought he was instrumental in the first goal. He takes the defender out the play, gives Bellingham the space, and then he gets the assist for the second. So whether or not Gareth sees that and makes the changes is yet to be seen. Sort of keep my eye on the time there. Just come back to you. What does this season look like for you? What are you going to be covering? What can we expect from you? And what are your sort of aspirations going into it?
Well, I mean, just hope to be. I mean, I suppose the Champions League and the Europa League and the Europa Conference League are something that I really enjoy doing. And with those being expanded, I think I'm going to be doing a lot of travel this season. I think I'll be on planes quite a lot, which is fantastic. I mean, as I said to you earlier, I mean, I'm just so lucky to be able to go to all these different places. And I suppose I'm hoping that I get to tick off a few more stadiums. I mean, last season I got to go to the Olimpico, which is one I'd always wanted to go to. I got to go to San Siro twice, actually. I was at San Siro once for a Milan game, once for an Inter game. So they were fantastic to go to. I think Munich was another that I ticked off. I'd really like to go to Dortmund at some point. That's one that I've not done yet. But yeah, I think that. No, I haven't actually. And it's funny because a few times now people have said to me, have you done that? And would you like to? And I'd absolutely love to at some point. I mean, we have Rory Hamilton, who's a fantastic commentator, does the Celtic and Rangers games. So I don't know. You never know. You go where you get told to go. So I don't know if I'll ever get the chance. I mean, something might crop up one day, but I would love to cover one of the or both of them. Really, it would be great to get the opportunity to maybe cover one of them in Europe, or I can't really see how it would happen at the moment, but it's hopefully I've got many years in front of me. I never know whether I might get to cover an Old Firm derby one day. Who knows where contracts and rights and what have you will go. But yeah, that would be quite nice actually. Yeah, I've always heard great things about the atmosphere at those games.
Absolutely, I'll vouch for that. Adam, thanks very much for your time. An absolute pleasure. If you're watching us on YouTube or on Catch Up, like, subscribe, leave a comment, and we'll see you again on the other side. Thanks very much.